And welcome back to the Rack Show. I am one of your hosts, Frank Horvath. Joined with me in studio is Tim Kelly. Tim, how are you doing today, sir?
Wonderful, man. Wonderful.
Man, we have quite a bit to talk about today. Force on force, that is going to be our topic for the day. We're going to be diving in a little bit on what force on force training is, why it's important, why I personally feel like it is an invaluable tool. And we'll kind of see how the conversation goes from there. So before we get into that, Tim, how are you doing? How has your week been? It's been a minute since we've seen each other. How was? I think we did a training event here recently. How'd that all go?
Yeah, man. It's been hectic. We've been all over the place. So we went up to Virginia and taught a class, and Culpeper taught an advancing everyday carry class, 2 days worth of content. Had some fantastic students in the class, a lot of hard workers. Wouldn't you know it, Friday night, I hit the rack and wake up about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I felt like a train hit me.
No.
So I come down with a pretty bad cold, and luckily I had Dan there, who's anytime we ever teach classes, one of the things that we try to make sure that we do is that we have an AI that can. Essentially, they co-teach with you,
right?
And they're capable of teaching the entire class themselves, so that if something like that does happen, then we're good. So he was able to fill in for me quite a bit that last weekend, and that helped out a lot. Took a nap on Monday, and kind of took the day off on Monday and Tuesday, and first in a duck season hit this week. So tried to get out of bed and go. So I came back this morning. That's why I'm not all dressed up like I normally am. I had a successful hunt. That was a good, really, really good time. Solo hunts are some of the more
relaxing,
more fun ones. Yeah, because more memorable ones. There's always something that occurs. Like I almost hit a deer with my golf cart. And had a beaver walk right up next to me. Like it was nuts.
Sounds like the normal stories that you hear of like fishermen. I caught the biggest fish, and you were by yourself. You're like, yeah, okay, man.
Yeah.
Cool. Hey, my week this past week is business as usual. A lot of running around, a lot of work, a lot of fun stuff. But kind of helping out with the engineering here at the station, we had a couple of big events that happened. Town hall was this past week, so got to go off site and do some fun stuff. So that all worked out well, and we got some fun stuff that's in the pipeline. Cool. So getting back to force on force training. So for our listening audience, Tim, what is force on force training, and how is it beneficial?
So force on force training is a lot. It's like scenario-based content or contextual content for the student to learn. Essentially, when most people think of their gun class, they show up to a gun class to learn how to shoot. So they're shooting live rounds into paper targets, cardboard targets, or steel targets, something along those lines. They've got a line of students with an instructor or a coach behind them who's guiding the whole process. With force on force training, if it's done properly, it's a sanitized area. So there's no live ammunition, nothing that can hurt you as far as, like deadly force or whatever. There's no sharp objects. There's no live agent pepper sprays. There's nothing. You get everything sanitized, the entire area sanitized, and you use stuff like airsoft guns, or you use UTMs. I'm sure we'll talk about that in a little while, or simunition type thing. And think of it kind of more like role playing, and where you either have a scenario where you have a bad guy inserted, or you just have nobody's good, nobody's bad, but you're learning how to make hits and learn how to manipulate cover and concealment or something along those lines.
You're working on a particular skill.
Right. And you're doing that with another live individual who's also trying to do the same thing.
Yeah.
So what that offers you is a little bit more of that adrenaline rush.
Yeah.
You get a better understanding of what it looks like when you have an opponent.
Yep.
right? So it can very quickly turn into an airsoft match if you're not careful, or a paintball match.
Right.
Yeah, it can. So it has to be done really. It has to be done by someone who is who can orchestrate it in a professional way,
Yep.
and where it just doesn't turn into something that really doesn't provide you the value that it could.
Right. Yeah. The one of the biggest things as far as that training, one of the biggest benefits is that stress inoculation, right? So you're adding more things on top of. I mean, you may think you have a skill to conquer to a level of automaticity, but how do you know unless you're put into a position where you actually are forced to use it and it's not the same, right? It's not the same stress, but it's probably one of the closer things that we can get to being in a scenario, being in a situation where we are forced to use these skill sets, these tools, whatever it may be. And again, having somebody, having another live body, having another person there who's doing the exact same thing back to you.
Right.
So it's a really phenomenal training aid. Really kind of helps with your thought process and thinking, helps to discover some things. Tools aside, it really helps get you in the right mind space as far as okay, well, I'm going to act this particular way. I have this this game plan going, but in the moment when there's another individual that's actually reaching out, and and I don't want to say we get aggressive with force, but sometimes, right? Then if somebody's has you all wrapped up, then your plan that you had has just radically changed. And I like to say, everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face, right?
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing. I mean, it depends on who you're training with and what you're doing and how
Sure.
far you want to push it. But regardless, it's kind of the same plan, same idea. But no, yeah, the stress inoculation is paramount. I mean, it's so good.
Well, like in our class this last weekend, on the second day, we generally do something we call the interactive concepts. So we
Right.
discuss decision making. We discuss pre-decision making, decision making, and post-decision making.
Right.
And like we tell our students, like your end goal with the force on force component of the class, which is rather short. It's just one little evolution. It's nothing crazy. Is you need to be able to ask yourself, did I meet my mission, right? And in the beginning of that class, they write out what their mission is. Did I meet my mission? Were my actions lawful? And can I live with those decisions for the rest of my life?
Right.
And so oftentimes you see a bunch of different reactions to the same, the same event is taking place. So,
Right.
They get inserted into this micro scenario where they're either going to make they're going to make a choice, and any teeny tiny little variable that changes on the student's behalf completely changes and remaps out the outcome of the event. And so where students really benefit the most from that is not just from being inserted into the scenario, but also after they've gone, they sit down and watch other people go through it.
Absolutely.
So they can have a seat in the Monday morning quarterback area.
Yep.
and go, well, I would have, but I didn't.
and it gets that direct, immediate feedback, right? So
Right.
you have another instructor there, you have somebody who's reputable, and I think we'll talk about it in the next segment. But you have that immediate feedback of, did the decision I make work, right?
Right.
Was I able to accomplish my mission? But what could I have done better? What can I do better next time?
Right.
So you can really help play through that. And then you also have your peers. You have your peers who can say the exact same thing. Hey, I really like that, but let's do better next time, or whatever it may be, right? You kind of get multiple points of view. You're listening to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. We'll be back in the next segment. We're going to be talking about how to train safely with force on force.
Welcome back. Welcome back. We are talking about some force-on-force stuff. And, Frank and I were wanting to discuss how to train safely with force-on-force. And I think that's a really, really important element, especially for those that are listening that have never done any type of force-on-force element where you are engaged in some type of fighting scenario, right, with another individual. And stuff like this is very delicate. Like you've got to. There's a certain way you have to orchestrate this to make sure that everybody leaves, safe, right, and uninjured and that type of thing. Because there are a lot of instances where people have gotten hurt and even killed or permanently injured because of this type of thing, because it was led incorrectly. And that's it, man. You have to make sure that you're getting in with somebody that is competent enough to actually do this. I'm thinking of one specific instance where an instructor ended up shooting a student in Pennsylvania, and I believe he was paralyzed, like from the neck down. And what ended up happening was this instructor had left the area, put his gun back on him, his live gun back on him, and he'd come back. To my best of my understanding, he come back into the scenario, never took his gun off, and then inserted himself into the scenario, and then ended up using his gun, I guess thinking that it was an airsoft gun, and he shot a student. I can assure you that there are professionals out there, and you and I both experienced them and seen them, that put serious measures in place to keep that from happening. And those are the folks you really want to train with. Another avenue where this can be done incorrectly is in law enforcement. How many instances do you remember, especially of the blanks and the .38 revolvers, right? And that somebody loaded a wad cutter into it, ended up killing somebody. It's really easy to do if it's not ran correctly.
Yeah, and the biggest piece of that is being attentive and speaking up, right? So if you decide, all right, I'm in that step of my training journey, as a responsible armed citizen, you should be training if you're not. But all right, I feel like I have at least the fundamental basis of the skills, or I want to kind of feel this out and see maybe how would I react during a force-on-force encounter or something like that, right? So you want to start to investigate this a little bit. If there's not clear understanding, clear roles of, where equipment, if there's not clear understanding from, coming down from the instructor who's running class of, all right, everybody defang, everybody, take sharp objects off, everybody take, no live firearms, and there's a process of verifying that. Then you need to stop and you need to say something. There's especially in this community, in our area, unfortunately, there are force-on-force training, and then there are experiences, right? And sometimes it's very hard to understand and determine what the difference between the experience and the force-on-force training is. So there's some training companies out there who would say this is force-on-force training, and it's nothing more than an experience. And what I mean by that is, as a civilian, do you need to be getting full gear? You're talking plates and all this other tactical stuff, and go out and play pretend, right? It's your right. You absolutely can. There is some benefit to that. But if it is not done constructively, if it is not done with purpose, with a particular intent, right, something that you are specifically going for, you are specifically training for, then it's playing pretend, right? It's LARPing. So again, don't get me wrong. Like there's time and place for that, but if you're just trying to get an introduction on force-on-force training, you don't need all of that. It's really that stress inoculation. You're not going to battle when you go to Walmart. You're going with you and the gear that you have, or and the tools that you have that's available to you, your skill sets that are there that are available to you.
Right.
There's just so much there that you can work off of. But more importantly, like I said, it comes down to that training company. It comes down to that instructor really sanitizing the area, making sure everything's clear, having clear SOPs or standard operating procedures put in place, so that there's no single point of failure.
Right.
Speaking of that, Tim, we've taken some awesome classes from instructors that have done this remarkably well.
Right.
Who are your recommendations for people aside from Apache? Who are your recommendations for some people, some classes that you've taken that really stood out to you?
All right, for sure. So my first real exposure to force on force was in the Marine Corps, and we did that often. Right, often, and we used simunitions. So they're like these little paintball rounds that go inside your gun and that type of thing. The sanitation process and everything was relatively simple because we have a very strict process of how you actually check out ammo and that type of thing anyway. So the only thing that we had in the training area was simunitions. There were no live rounds ever checked out of the ammo place, and our rifles have these different bolts, right, that will only work with simunition. So even if somebody had a live round in their pocket or something like that, it wouldn't cycle. Right? I mean, we didn't even have all the gear to make the guns live. So that was the sanitation process, was pretty much eliminate any possibility that we'd have a live gun in the area. Now, with that being said, there's no real pat down process. There was no patting down or anything like that. So my first exposure in the civilian world to force-on-force training was with me and you. We went to Pennsylvania to take an armed vehicle defense class with Phil Groff. I believe he now calls that class vehicle now.
Right.
It just
shortened it.
Keeping it simple, right? And it goes through the process of fighting around a vehicle. Now, you start off on day one using live ammunition.
Right.
And then day two, somewhere, I think in the afternoon, depends on...
second half of the day.
He usually switches to UTM rounds, which is, again, that little paintball cartridge.
Marker,
right? And you have these specific guns that they work in. So there has to be a sanitation process where you remove all of those dangerous things away from the students so they can't hurt themselves or hurt somebody else. And then you can't just take somebody's word for it.
Right.
You have to pat them down and make sure everything's good.
Yeah, trust but verify.
And I'd say that the coolest thing I liked about the way he handled that was he brings everybody into one space, and then there is a line drawn, essentially, and then he pats everybody down, make sure you're good, and then he ties a little flag around your leg. Right? And once you cross that line, anything that you take with you has been inspected. If you have a bag that you're taking with you, a helmet or anything like that, helmet's a face mask, right? If you have any of that stuff with you, it all gets checked. So anybody that crosses that line is all clear. They have been sanitized. If for whatever reason they have to cross back over that line, go use the restroom or something like that, they have to take off their band, and they have to let him know. So when they come back, he has to pat them down again, tie on another band, and that sort of thing. So that's his way of leaving no single point of failure. There's absolutely no way somebody could just accidentally, or even intentionally slip in to that environment, that sanitized area, without being caught.
Right.
So I think that's a really, really good way of doing it. And again, that's Phil Groff of Vigor Training. One of the other ones that really stands out to me, is we don't have a whole lot of time to talk about all of these awesome instructors that are out there, is ShivWorks.
Craig Douglas
of ShivWorks. And man, that's a whole nother level of force on force.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is it is an experience. But it's excellent. There's a lot of hands-on in that one, though.
Right.
Like you can strike, you can throw fists. It's not just about shooting each other.
Right.
Like it's it's a very intimate process.
Yeah, yeah.
And you don't just show up to class and get inserted into it, right? Like he works you up to up to that level,
and meet you where your skill set is, right? So I mean that's one of the biggest things is, if you're looking for a class, if you go and experience something, if you have somebody who's just throwing you into it and are, all right, this is what we're doing today, and you're not ready for that, what are you actually receiving? What are you actually learning?
Right.
That's one. No, I absolutely love Craig Douglas, and it's for exactly that. He's able to, him and his team, right, ShipWorks, they're able to say, all right, well, this is where you're at. This is kind of where your background. I'm going to peg you with somebody who has similar background or similar interest, or, they are going to, when you're rolling around with them, they're going to not, just go full out. They're going to allow you to learn, right? That's one of the better things about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, with Craig, he has a very similar sanitation process. Right. All the live guns get put away. Everybody gets patted down. You have a sanitized area. You can't just go back to your car and everything. You can't. You have to stay there. But yeah, it's a very, very similar process. A very safe environment. Even though you're throwing fists at each other and stuff, you have the right gear. Yep. You're 100% taken care of there. And as far as Craig goes and the way he leads it, he's an absolute genius.
Oh yeah.
I mean, this guy was an undercover, narcotics agent for, many, many years. I mean, for the longest time, the training community only knew him as South Narc, which was his name on all of the gun forums, right? And the guy has a lot of time spent with people, dangerous people, right? Face to face. He's been held at gunpoint. He's been, held at knife point. He's been robbed. He's sold drugs and that type of thing. He's to very, very bad people. And so he's got a great deal of experience that he can pass off on to the student. So there is a lot of really, really good benefits to this. And it's not to teach an individual how to, go off and buy drugs or whatever, right? It's to teach them, hey, this is what violence really looks like. This is where it comes from, and this is what's going through their minds. And here's how you navigate through those things. So there's a lot of managing unknown contacts and navigating your personal space and that type of thing that really goes into it. But Craig is an absolute genius. Anytime you ever get to train with ShipWorks, man, get on that opportunity.
Yeah, quickly, one of my favorite things about training with Craig is, when during the debrief process, he asks you, what did you do well? Right? And he lets you speak for yourself. He's not immediately jumping things down your throat. It's invaluable. You're listening to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. We've got a break coming up. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show, where we talk about all things the responsibly armed citizen should know. We are having a conversation on training, specifically force-on-force training. We talked a little bit about, what force-on-force training was, what the difference between that and an experience was. We talked a little bit about at least 2 examples of trainers that are out there that are just phenomenal as far as how they go about doing that. Tim, I want to talk a little bit about the tools, the gear. What makes what makes these gear so specialized and safe for the use of force-on-force training? Because like we had said, and you can't just use your regular stuff. Well, there's too much of a chance for negligence to happen, too much of a chance for an accident to happen, right? Mm-hmm. So you really should have some specialized gear set aside, or the trainer should provide some specialized gear that's set aside, so that in this safe environment, this sanitized environment, safe training, safe practice, safe skill set development can be learned. So let's dive into that a little bit. So what are some of the tools and what are some of the gear? What does that look like for force-on-force training?
Well, I think there are many different levels of it. We tend to use airsoft because our evolutions are just so short. Like it's just a one insert and 1 or 2 inserts right into a scenario, and then that's it. It's meant to bring all of the content that you learn that weekend in live fire together in evolution, and to measure those skill sets in that area. So when we use an airsoft, those can be bought off of Amazon. I mean, you can literally buy a replica, an exact replica of a Glock, of a SIG, or any of those things, and they fit in their respective holsters. So a really quick and easy way and cost-effective way of getting into some force-on-force. Now, you don't have any loud pops or loud bangs. You're not using any type of real cartridges, but they're generally powered by either spring power, they're powered by CO2, or they're powered by propane or green gas, right? And now these are all regulated as well, to my knowledge. You might be able to speak to that a little bit more than me, but to my knowledge, they're all regulated and only fire these little airsoft plastic BBs.
Yep.
0.177, something like that.
Yeah, anyways, small little pellets, right? Biodegradable pellets most of the time. Right.
And they only fire a couple hundred feet per second.
Yeah.
Under 300 feet per second, I would imagine.
Yep.
Right, somewhere around there. So you can get away with training with those with as little as just some sufficient eye protection, right? Not like your reading glasses, but sufficient.
Yeah, something that wrap around covers of
goggles,
some sort. Right?
Yeah, goggles preferably, something along those lines that's going to stay on your face. Now, other people might choose to wear, a neck guard or something like that. But I mean, in airsoft, especially in that type of environment, chances are it's a one and done type thing. You might shoot 2 or 3 times. Again, it's not a big deal.
Right.
When you start moving into some of the other gear, we'll use ours as the base level, and then we'll say Phil Groff from Vigor Training is the more of a step up from that, and then we'll move into what ShivWorks does. Phil's, and like many other trainers, he uses UTM.
Yep.
And the UTM, as I was saying before, has a specialized cartridge that has a plastic shell around where you would see the actual projectile or bullet, and encased in that is blue or pink paint.
Right.
And so it's this little marking round. The gun itself is powered by this cartridge, much like your real handgun would be, except the blast is, what is it? Just essentially a Magnum pistol primer or something like that. So once again, the projectile, the plastic paint projectile that's going to break apart when it hits you, is only traveling at a certain rate of
less than
speed.
300 feet per second.
So it is regulated by, UTM or Simunitions or any of those other places. So again, a regulated product.
And,
right?
and what's interesting about UTM, one of the reasons why I like it so much is, the UTM cartridges can only be fired out of their platform, right? They're specialized UTM training firearms, and you cannot fit a regular cartridge, inside of those UTM training pistols or training rifles.
Right.
Very specialized, expensive, works very well.
Yeah.
Very well. It's one of the closer things that you can get to force on force training, at least on the civilian side.
Sure. They're notoriously called the angry bees.
Yeah.
Right. Because they do sting. They do sting.
Yeah.
And
they can break skin.
Yeah, they're going to break skin a lot of times, especially one of the more common places where folks get hit, especially in that type of environment, is in the hands and forearms and that area. So if you're not wearing gloves, 100% it's going to break skin.
Yep.
Going to cause you a little bruise and a little welt, but you know what? It's enough to kind of wake you up and help you realize, man, what if that would have been an actual bullet?
Right.
Like, man, that kind of really puts things into perspective, gets you thinking.
It really highlights, the benefit of force because you go, ow, that hurt. I don't want that to hurt ever again. Let me change my behavior so that doesn't hurt again.
Right.
So
there you go.
It helps reinforce that.
So with those, you can't just get away with wearing safety goggles.
Right.
You really do need full face protection. You need some type of neck guard. You really do need some type of neck guard because getting hit in the neck with those things, bare skin, really, really, really hurts.
Yeah, not fun.
So you want to, at the very least, wrap a towel around you. Groin protector is essential. You really do need something like that. Male and female, it does not matter. You need groin protection. So groin protection, neck protection, and full face, and preferably head, is really the essential gear needed when you're using that type of product. And that's pretty much it for if you're just using UTMs, and that's the only force that you're applying in that environment.
Right.
Now, when you get into something even more special like what Craig does at ShivWorks, now you're starting to run into a completely different dynamic.
Right.
It's not just guns that are being inserted. You have dummy knives, right, or training knives really is what's being brought into it. So training knives. And then you have inert pepper spray.
Yep.
You have all types of different tools that are being brought into this. And students are allowed to physically make contact with each other.
Right.
So if I'm wearing my old paintball mask in that class and I get rocked by somebody, throwing a hard right hook, I mean, it's going to really mess me up.
Right.
So you can't wear that type of gear.
Right.
So Craig has some different padded helmets, right, where you can still see and read the facial expression of the other person, right? So it's still really rather intimate, right? But if I hit you hard, like
you're still gonna feel it.
Yeah. You're gonna feel it. You might, at the very, very least, or at the very most, I should say, sorry, at the very most, it might end up with a bloody nose or something like that. But for the most part, I mean, it's enough to wake you up and say, "Oh man, if that were a solid right hook,
right,
I might have ended up on the ground."
Yeah,
So it's a different level of protective gear. You still have to have the groin protection, and you have to wear gloves, right? So you're wearing like MMA gloves. They're fairly padded, fingerless gloves, but again, it's a different level of protection for its appropriate force-on-force element.
Yeah, and something else that's interesting, again, with the specialized gear, right, you have, it's not all specialized, right, like the MMA pads and, the fighting pads, things like that. That's, fairly, regular off the shelf. But when you start getting into, like, the training knives, right, there are special training blades that are set up without an edge, right, completely edgeless, but they look very similar. They operate similar to like how you would carry an actual blade in many instances. They're not all just plastic plastic blades, and nothing will make you feel as I want to say unprepared as going and taking a Craig Douglas ShivWorks class, because you go, yeah, okay, I think I got this skill, and then you're pitted up against somebody who has way more skills than you do, and you get wrapped up in a little pretzel. It's not fun. Or get beat around quite a bit. Make sure you reassess life goals. But so we have just a little bit of time left. This is something that I did want to bring. Something I did want to talk a little bit about. We talked a little bit about UTM, right? So I received a letter from UTM, and I want to read just a section of this real quick. So, dear valued UTM customer, et cetera, et cetera. In summary, orders and deliveries for military and law enforcement customers are not affected by this change. All non-military and law enforcement customers will not be able to purchase UTM products directly from distributors effective immediately. The ATF has a new ruling which does not allow the import of UTM products for civilian or non-law enforcement, non-military use. So we just spent, I want to say, what was it, 5-10 minutes talking about, the benefits of using UTM specifically, right? And the classes that they have just been just phenomenal in. And now, as of this past week, you are no longer allowed to, as a civilian, to purchase UTM products. You're no longer allowed to purchase that. What's your reaction to that, Tim? Like, where do you stand on that?
I am like up to my ears in anger with the decisions the ATF has been making regarding firearms for the last year and a half. Like, it has just been absolutely ridiculous. And unfortunately, the people that are put in place to make these decisions and make these laws have no level of real education in the subject matter, and that does. It makes me rather frustrated to have to deal with this. Is unfortunately there's a lot of very, very experienced instructors out there that could use that product to possibly save someone's life.
Absolutely.
And that's being taken away from them because they don't have a badge. Right? Like, that's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. I don't find it to be any. I just don't find any use in this new order.
See, and that's the piece that frustrates me. It's not law, right? It is a ruling, right? Yeah. So a 3-letter agency has given us a ruling. The ATF has given us a ruling saying, hey, you know what? We arbitrarily don't like this product anymore, and because we arbitrarily don't like this product anymore, you can't have it anymore either.
Yeah.
And that is just not that's not cool.
No.
I mean, there's just so many problems with that. Like, if it came down as law, right? If the masses of people decided they didn't want this particular product, okay, maybe, right? That's if all these people are saying that this is a dangerous product, okay, maybe. But you're going to just give an arbitrary rule and kick me, stop me from using this product. You're listening to Rack Show. We'll be right back.
Welcome back to the Rack Show. My name is Tim Kelly. This is the Responsibly Armed Citizen Show. We talk about everything regarding the responsibly armed citizen. Frank and I have been discussing various things regarding force on force, that scenario-based training type thing that you see a lot in the training community of. We've talked about all kinds of different stuff regarding force on force. And one of the things we've been talking about is different instructors who offer different force on force training options. Before we go any further, I want to make sure I do point out I haven't had a chance to actually take a class from him, but I do know Craig pulls from his instructors as role players. So he's got a really good thing going. His name is Carl Wren. He owns Carl Wren Training down in Texas. Anybody ever gets a chance to read his book, the name of the book, the title of the book is actually just ran past me. But if you're a firearms training company or a firearms instructor yourself, just Google Carl Wren and check out his book. It's an excellent read. Really, really good stuff. Anyhow, so we've been talking about Craig Douglas and ShivWorks and his ECQC course, and I sent Frank a video on our last break of me getting pummeled inside of a car.
And it is absolute gold. It is so good.
So we thought we'd share that with you. If you're actually able to watch with us, fantastic. If not, I'll do my best to try to explain what's happening in the video.
Digital media, YouTube people,
yeah.
If digital fam, if you guys can take a look at it and watch Tim just get whomped, please join us. But I think Tim's going to try and narrate a little bit what's actually happening here for the radio fam.
All right, so a little bit of a backstory on this. What you're seeing here is me inside of a vehicle, and I'm inside of a vehicle with another student. We've got all of our gear on, and it's actually the final exercise for the weekend. And the other guy's in the car. His name is Tim as well. And so what he is doing is he's supposed to be robbing me at gunpoint, at which time I am supposed to defend myself, right? I have to get out of it. He robbed me of the opportunity of just straight compliance, do whatever I have to survive type thing without violent encounter. He robbed me of that. You have to make a decision, and you have to fight your way out of it. Now, this is full bore, full fists, like hold no punches type thing. So at this point in the video, what we're going to pick up is Tim actually taking up all of the space in the vehicle, and he is shoving the gun in my face, and I am disarming him. So let's see what happens there. So I'm disarming him. That's Craig talking in the background, complimenting me on the disarm. And I'm trying to spin around. And now Tim is a blue belt. I'm in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. He's also got about 75, 80 pounds on me. So all I'm doing is trying to gain some real estate so I can turn around and actually get my gun oriented in his direction. There's the first shot in the arm, and then I'm kind of hanging out the window, and I just start shooting into his leg. Tim asked me later on, he said, "When were you going to stop shooting?" I said, "When I could see daylight on the other side."
Yeah, when the threat is no longer there.
Right. So when he pushed me up against that we call the B pillar, right? He's got me smushed up against the wall. There's like very little room. I couldn't move, man. And all I'm trying to do is turn around. But he's got his shoulder driven into me. He's pushing up against my ribs. Like there's a lot of stuff happening there.
Yep.
If it were not for that helmet, that good solid piece of gear that he puts on top of your head, keeps your melon protected, I would have been in a lot of pain because he had my head smushed up against the side of the car.
Yeah.
Right. So anyhow, I was able to take his gun away from him, but I wasn't able to access my own. Now, my only option was to use his firearm. So what I ended up doing was clearing the gun out because I didn't know really what condition it was in and trying to use it to defend myself. So the only way I could turn around was by practically crawling outside of the car.
Yeah.
So all I was trying to do is use that window space to turn around. The UTMs are great for this though, because you've seen how close that was.
Yeah.
Right. Like I was point blank range, and there are other students in the class that literally had the gun pressed up against them.
Yep.
And when the opponent was pressing the trigger, and yeah, does it leave some bruises and welts? Yeah. But are you alive?
Right.
You're alive from it. Like it's not going to kill you. But it certainly leaves you with an everlasting reminder of what could have been. And, I leave that scenario, feeling better about the decisions that I made, and knowing that if I were to make a mistake in that area, during that class, if I were to make a mistake, I can always make up for it. Right. I can learn from that mistake. Whereas if my first violent encounter happened to be like that, and it was real, and I had never experienced anything like that before, and all I had to rely on were my ego.
Yeah.
I cannot tell you enough just how useful force on force is.
I mean, think about that. So how many classes have we taught, or how many classes have we been in where that ego is like the primary driving factor of why somebody is there? We talk about concealed carry a lot, right? That state mandated class. We see a lot of egos in that class. Fortunately, not in our classes. We have great students, but every now and then you get usually a gentleman that will come in, or a male that will come in, and if I ever have to use my firearm, I'm gonna shoot him dead, or whatever it is, right? It's all like ego, and there's no background, there's no training, there's no skill set that would prove otherwise. And that's exactly it. It's you'd be, we talk to people constantly, like, what do you think, what are you going to do? Well, how do you know? How do you know what you're going to do if you haven't been put into a training scenario? How do you know what you're going to do if you haven't been at least had the forethought to think about a particular event, and kind of get a rough idea of what's there? How do you know what skill sets you actually have concreted in, cemented, and what is going to be useful to you if you're not put in a position where you can practice those skill sets? Right. So it's easy to pull up a video. It's easy to talk to somebody. It's easy to even sit in on a class or a lecture. But once it comes time to putting into application that exact skill set, how do you know that it's going to be there and you're going to be able to successfully use it? That's where training like this, the force on force. That's where getting with an instructor who is an authority in whatever that they're teaching is just so necessary. Right? Essential. Yeah. I mean, there's just so much there that you can learn from those environments and be putting inside situations like that. Again, the stress inoculation, right? The having another physical body that's coming at you with again, that's a training environment, but it's not going to be identically the same, but still you get a taste of what's happening. You get a taste of somebody shooting back at you. You get a taste of somebody doing you harm. How many people, kids growing up, right? My daughter this past week ended up getting kicked out of school because she punched another kid in the head. But I can't say that there are many other kids that have gotten into fights, right? That have gotten actually punched. When's the last time you've been punched in the face?
I try to keep it that way.
but like I said, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. I mean, there's always something that it's gonna snap you out of your world, your normal living, and if you don't have the skill sets to support whatever action you decide to do, you're behind the eight ball. So there's one of two things you can do. You can either accept whatever is happening to you, or you can go reach out and get the skill sets, like learn more skill sets to help deter that future potential altercation.
Absolutely.
I know I've said it before. I'm not saying live paranoid. I'm not saying walk around and look, and think about, there's nothing but bad in this world. There's plenty of good. plenty of good. Listen to any other show that's on the station. There's plenty of good things that are out there. But there is evil, right? There is just malice in this world. There are people who want to do you harm. And this is just one tool in the toolbox. There's one simple thing that we can do to help mitigate some of that.
Right.
It's one of the things that makes me just so fired up over this ATF stuff and the UTM.
I know, man.
Man, I just get, I'm burnt on that.
It drives me nuts.
But anyway.
Hey, man, if we're not careful, we're going to forget the competency of the month.
That's right.
So let's hit on that. I'm going to do something a little bit different with it since we don't have a whole lot of time. But let me explain to you first what the competency of the month is. The competency of the month was originally designed for our cadre of instructors and apprentices over the years. It is designed to challenge them and their knowledge base. So what we do is we pick out a competency to try and encourage them to go and do their research, go and, write an article on the topic, learn more and share more with your fellow cadre members. And so we've been doing that throughout the year. When we started the RAC show, I figured, well, why not share that with our audience? This could be an awesome opportunity for them to learn about the competency that we are learning about and give them an opportunity to go and research that type of thing. So we have a minute left. We're going to talk about the practical use of revolvers for the purpose of self-defense, right? So what I want to do a little bit differently here is we can still talk about it briefly, but I would encourage our viewers to do a touch of research on revolvers for the purpose of self-defense. Shoot us an email and send us your thoughts on a practical use for carrying a revolver for the purpose of self-defense.
Yep, you can send that email to RAC at ApacheNC.com. So that's RAC at ApacheNC.com. Man, shoot us a video of what you think also. That's even better. You can, I know the YouTube overlords don't typically like it, but shoot us an idea, shoot us a comment, tell us what you think. How does a revolver play in, modern self-defense? How does that work out?
Awesome. Man. Thanks for the show.
Guys, thank you for the show, and thank you for watching the RAC Show, and we'll be back next week with another thrilling episode. See you then.